still don't think in any of these engagement issues he's ever come out favourably. I think as a driver you start to wonder if there's a level of favouritism towards the other driver. It's just natural. You get paranoid. You're in a title fight, and I wonder if that's where we're at with him a little bit.
Would you expect the rules of engagement to change now that the Constructors' Championship is in the bag?
The drivers will make that decision anyway, and the guy who comes out on top was probably the one who's gone to the edge of those rules, or even a little bit beyond at times.
How good is George Russell?
Surely he's indispensable to Mercedes. It's starting to look like he is very much a champion in waiting, I think.
Rob, I'd love your take on Ferrari's season.
It's not a great place to be in Maranello when things aren't going well, but they've got to remain united. I've been in that situation. It's horrible.
Hello everyone, and welcome to F1 Nation's preview of the United States Grand Prix with me, Tom Clarkson. I'm joined by F1 TV commentator and former Renault driver Jolyon Palmer and former Ferrari race engineer Rob Smedley. Let's start with McLaren. 6 races, 3 F1 sprints to go, and the first of those sprints is taking place in Austin this weekend. Oscar Piastri is 22 points clear of Lando Norris at the top of the table with 174 left to play for. Now, after what happened in Singapore, it feels like the intensity in the Drivers' Championship is climbing. Rob, let's start with you. What did you make of Lando and Oscar's incident on lap 1 in Singapore?
I think that when you start getting towards the pointy end of a world championship, no matter how hard you work, it always gets difficult. It's always going to get tetchy, right? There's so much on the line for the team and the 2 drivers within the team that it's always very, very difficult to manage. You know, I've been in that situation myself before, and you can't help. The drivers are such competitive animals that it spills over every now and again, you know. And there was this incident like we saw at the start of the Grand Prix. What did I think of that? I thought that it was probably Lando getting his elbows out, trying to go for a move that was just about there. It's the start of the race. You know, people will take slightly more risk at the start of the race. Did he do anything particularly wrong? Not really. Was Oscar right to feel aggrieved? Yes, probably. So you've got like this dichotomy. You're constantly trying to manage this pressure cooker inside the team. And there's never a perfect way to manage it. Somebody always comes off worse. I mean, we've seen that right throughout the season with McLaren, you know, when they've been dominating and they've been up, you know, they've been away up the road on their own. It's been a 1-2 for their cars. It's difficult to manage. It seems like a dream situation, you know, if you look from the midfield and think, God, I would love to have a car that dominant, but actually it's just a different situation with different problems that you have to manage. And I think McLaren are now facing that, and sometimes they get it right, sometimes they don't get it right. It's as simple as that.
I think the interesting thing is I completely agree with all of that. It was a move that was on. I liked Lando's aggression. I thought it was the first time he's looked like he's really wanted to hustle in and take risks to make some points. You have to do the move at the start in Singapore, otherwise you're not going to make it. He obviously felt like he needs to beat Oscar every time now, because the 25-point gap, now a 22-point gap, you've got to see it start shrinking. The problem is, and why we talk about it and why it was controversial, was because of the way that McLaren have tried to manage things this year, I think. So they're almost their own stewards, aren't they? They're looking at the race and they're thinking, is this fair between the drivers? So Monza was an example of them deciding that wasn't fair. We gave Lando a bad pit stop. We need to swap the places round. And I think that's the sort of thing that's then in Oscar's head in Singapore. He's saying, well, hang on, that's not fair. He's just overtaken me by wheel banging and I've gone off. So surely now you need to swap the places back in the same way as you did to me 2 races ago. Problem is, as we said after Monza, you cannot keep like the micromanagement to this degree and keep it fair across the board. I think that's why we're just starting to see, I would say, Oscar be disgruntled with the way things are going, because there are quite a few things that are sort of going against him here.
So do you think the gloves are off now?
I think they are. I think they have to be, don't they? And I liked it from Lando. He took the gloves off. I would say he took the gloves off, and now Oscar's got to realise that that's it. They've got to come off, and you cannot afford to go half-baked into a championship fight. I was also thinking, no, I would say at least double world champion has ever won the championship being nice. They're always nasty, aren't they? When you think about how, Max Verstappen races and how he's not really had a teammate to fight, but he races hard. He races, win or bust. You look at Sebastian Vettel, the multi-21 with Mark Webber, went against the team orders, got away with it. The Turkey one, he was tough. He was really tough and ruthless. You look at other people, Fernando Alonso, you look at Lewis Hamilton, you look at Michael Schumacher. Yeah, they're all tough nuts, and they don't take team orders. They don't sit there and accept it. They'll fight for their cause and argue it afterwards, and I think that's what we're starting to get to.
And I've been in this situation before when you're trying to manage like the fairness between the drivers, right? What happens in an F1 race is there's always a butterfly effect, right? So if you take the Monza situation, it was a bad pit stop, but then before that, if you remember, they'd swap the drivers in terms of the natural order in which they were going to pit, and before that something else happens, and when you're the driver is always in a situation where they pick that part of that whole chain of effects and say, oh, this is the bit that's affected me and this is the bit that's affected me badly. Quite often you'll find them, a driver might make a bad choice in qualifying and they put themselves on the back foot in the race, and then something will happen down the line where they choose to kind of pick something that is unfair for them. And I think that's why when it comes to what goes on the track, whether it's, the pit stops themselves or the natural order of sometimes when you have to swap, which driver comes in first, or you have to favour one driver over another because of something's happened in the race. That's just the way that these things play out. You can't pick an isolated incident and say this is fair or this is unfair. And I think that McLaren did the right thing in Singapore. The two drivers battled hard into the first corner. Again, I agree totally with you there here, Jolyon. It was great to see Lando showing a bit of aggression, showing that he wanted it. Because if he's going to have a chance at the World Championship, he's got to get in there. The team can't interfere on that. It was just the two guys racing hard together. Fair, unfair, I don't know. It's fair for somebody, it's unfair for somebody else. Get on with it. And I think that's the bit where once the lights go off, the teams, you've got your papaya rules or rules of engagement as they would be in any other team. Once the lights are off, it's kind of like whatever happens, you just have to get on with and deal with, and whatever the natural order is at the end, that's the natural order. Trying to get involved in it in the middle of it, it just creates problems and it just creates angst and it just creates a precedent that then one driver or another driver will come back and say, this happened there 3 years ago, so why are you now why are you doing something different?
Would you expect the rules of engagement to change now that the Constructors' Championship is in the bag?
Yes. Yeah, definitely. It now comes down to don't cause us a PR disaster, right? Maybe you can race a little bit harder. Maybe there can be a little bit more aggression. But I think the drivers, again, Jolyon made the point, the drivers will make that decision anyway. And the guy who comes out on top was probably the one who's gone to the edge of those rules or even a little bit beyond at times. I worked with Michael for so many years across, lots of those world championships. He was utterly ruthless and he went to the edge and beyond on occasions, as we all know, of what was acceptable. But he did that to get 7 stars. He's a 7-star general. He didn't do that by seeding and by thinking, oh, well, what does the team want me to do here? And will the team be upset with me? He that wasn't at the forefront of his mind at all. It was, how do I win this race? And what means do I have? What are the tools that I have? The car underneath me, but everything else that I've got as well. And I'm going to put them all on the table and use every single one of them. If that's aggression or, going beyond, sportsman behavior at times, as we saw on occasion with him, and we see with all the top guys, then so be it. You just have to kind of get on with it. So I think we would all like to see a little bit more, aggression from the two drivers in battling each other, the two McLaren drivers, and see which one comes out on top. That's what we watch Grand Prix racing for, right?
The other thing, though, is if you imagine it from Oscar's point of view, I still don't think in any of these moments, engagement issues, he's ever come out favourably. if I'm just thinking again, top of my head stuff, but you got the Silverstone one. He got a penalty, felt it was harsh, asked for the team to swap back if they thought it was harsh. They would have done. Had it been, Max, they would have thought it was an outrageous penalty. But because it was between the two McLarens, they kept the order. Lando wins. You've then got the Budapest strategy, where Oscar was the lead driver. Kind of got a bit done by his own team on strategy there, with Lando winning the race. You've got Monza, where he's actually had to give up a position. And then you've got Singapore, where Lando's wheel banged his way through and not had the swap around. I know in all of this, you've got Lando's lost points with a DNF in Zandvoort. Lando's had sort of slower pit stops more on average, even if Oscar got one in Singapore. But it must be a little bit grating for Oscar to think, flipping hell, can I just have one rub of the green here in terms of the teammate dynamics? I think as a driver, you start to wonder if there's a level of favouritism towards the other driver. It's just natural. You get paranoid. You're in a title fight. And I wonder if that's where we're at with him a little bit.
This episode is sponsored by Indeed. Hiring isn't just about finding someone willing to take the job. You need the right person with the right background who can move your business forward. If you want candidates who match what you're looking for, I'd trust Indeed Sponsored Jobs. Sponsored Jobs boost your post for quality candidates so you can reach the exact people you want faster. And it makes a big difference. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed are 90% more likely to report a hire than non-sponsored jobs because you reach a bigger pool of quality candidates. I know if I was hiring, I could be super specific and trust Indeed to find someone who fits the description I've given. I wouldn't be digging through resumes of people who don't match my needs. That's what makes the difference. You get people who actually are what you're looking for. Plus, with Indeed Sponsored Jobs, you only pay for results. No monthly subscriptions, no long-term contracts. Just a boost whenever you need to find quality talent fast. People are finding quality hires on Indeed right now. In the minute I've been talking to you, companies like yours made 27 hires on Indeed worldwide, according to Indeed data. Spend more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes. Less stress, less time, and more results now with Indeed Sponsored Jobs. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to help get your job the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/nation. Just go to Indeed.com/nation right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/nation. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Do it the right way with Indeed. I had a really interesting chat with James Vowles on F1 Beyond the Grid last week. He witnessed firsthand the intense championship fights between Lewis Hamilton and Nico Rosberg at Mercedes. And I asked him how he'd handle a future title battle between Alex Albon and Carlos Sainz. And this is what he said.
Professional racing drivers are like any elite athlete in the world. They want to have something where they know they can push the limits to, but in a way that they understand what those limits are, so that when they're transcending it, you have a correction mechanism in place. Think of it as creating a box around them. That's your box. That's where you push into it. You push a millimeter over that, on the other hand, you step into my world, and this is how we correct it. So the construct isn't trying to restrict them. It's trying to give them the boundaries where they know as a sportsman they can absolutely push themselves to the limit, but at least they know where the limit is now. When I spoke about 2016, my learning was you've got to be so clear on that, abundantly clear, that people understand that when you transcend that, the consequences are dire.
What's in your armoury? How do you punish a world champion elect?
The most harshest of punishments is you're not in the car next week. Correct.
And you would have that in your back pocket?
If you had two drivers that were pushing themselves, that they are effectively crashing into each other more than they're finishing a race, yes.
Rob, was that threat ever used at Ferrari?
No, absolutely not. I think it's like, I think you've got to have sanctions that are sensible, not going in the car the next week, being replaced. You're only hurting yourself, right? Because there's a reason why you've got the two drivers that you have as your two official drivers. If you're going to replace them with a non-official driver, you're going to hurt the team at that point. So I think you've got to, I agree with James, you have to have limits. And the one thing that I think that is so true in what he said, is there has to be clarity, right? You cannot have an ounce of ambiguity. Now, what happens is, where does the ambiguity come in? The ambiguity comes in because there's an edge case that you haven't thought about. So you say, here's the rules of engagement. This is what we do, right? Usually on a Sunday morning, team principal, senior members of the very senior members of the team and the two drivers would sit down, and we would all sit around in an office in the hospitality, and we would say, right, here's the rules of engagement. This is what we're going to do, right? If this happens at turn one, this is what happens. If this happens during the first lap, this is what happens. Here's how you engage. Here's how you don't engage. Where you get the blow-ups is the edge cases, right? Because we wouldn't sit there and say, if one of you drives into the other one in turn two and drives it towards the wall, that's an unexpected behavior. So you've got to have complete clarity between your drivers. You've got to set the boundaries, is absolutely right. So, of course, for the team, it's always that you want to, you want that Constructors' Championship. The drivers solely focus on themselves. And that's right, by the way, right? If you had, we go back to the point Jolyon made, very early on, if you've got drivers who are, the best team players and that's all they ever think about is the team and they never think about themselves, you've got the wrong guy in the car. You need warriors in the car who are thinking solely about themselves. You then have to set the boundaries and the conditions that in they're elite athletes, so they're selfish. That's part of their makeup. But you have to set the boundaries within which they work, that their behavior has the best outcome for the team. That's how you play it. But you're never going to get a driver, especially multiple world championship drivers, going back to the point we were talking about earlier, who are thinking, how can I help all my teammates out? In fact, not only that, how do I help the guy across the garage out? Let me do something really magnanimous for them. No way. That's never going to happen.
So I like the idea that, James is such a nice, straightforward viewpoint that you can bench the driver if they do something bad enough. That's the threat. Can you guys remember that ever happening in Formula One? And bearing in mind the list of names that have been pretty contentious at times, you going to bench Senna from the next Grand Prix? We didn't think that was fair. In comes Jolyon Palmer for the next race. No.
Love it.
It's not happening, is it? And so this is from a driver's viewpoint. I think there's a level of championship ruthlessness that these guys have, and they will do whatever it takes. And in the end, you ask for forgiveness, and it's a bit awkward. You walk in and you're like, oh, really sorry, I need to apologise, and put some level of vague viewpoint over that it wasn't completely your fault. There was a misunderstanding somewhere. And we're talking about someone getting benched for the next race, but I can't remember any level of hindrance for the next race, like sit out of an FP1 or have a worse strategy or swap the cars in the Grand Prix. Or in the end, they're all words, aren't they? In the end, the team have to sort of get on with it because you've still got warriors in the car and you want to win the race. So you put the best guy in and you say, don't do that again. And if they do, what are you going to do again?
It is part of McLaren's problem that Piastri and Norris are so similar in performance. It seems to me that whole list of drivers that you mentioned right at the start, Jolyon, in the intra-team battle, there was always one driver who was better than the other, right? And I think you have to go back to 2007 to the last time you had a blow-up like we might get between the current McLaren drivers because they're so similar, and that was Alonso and Hamilton because they were so similar. It doesn't the dynamic work best when you can give them equal equipment, but it just so happens that one of them is better than the other?
But it usually happens like that, doesn't it? It's very rare that you have drivers that are so evenly matched like we've got now, and they have the best car, that there's not a third challenger, a Kimi, that's going to steal it right at the end. So normally there will be the momentum, even with Lewis and Nico Rosberg. Even if it's close, that Lewis has the talent and probably will eventually get there. And he was pretty unlucky in the 2016 year. I also just think I don't see this one blowing up entirely. I think the gloves will come off. I think they might get, there'll be some more moments, but I don't know if the drivers have necessarily got it in them to be the 10 out of 10 do it all. I don't know, they get on very well. They've still got such respect across the garage. They have respect for the team, and I don't think they're going to risk blowing the whole thing up. I think they'll risk, a dicey overtake here, but I don't think they're going to be, win or crash necessarily.
I'm totally with that as well. I think you kind of, I don't know intimately Lando nor Oscar, but you can just from observing them, at close quarters and having worked with, guys like Michael, guys like Fernando, who will, push to the limits to get what they want, all day, every day. Yeah, I think we've got two different personalities here, but I think we've got two different personalities who are also probably, let's call it, like molding into their personalities. Don't forget they're still pretty young, the pair of them. They're not rookies anymore. Far from it. They've got experience, but this is the first time that they've operated. We're into new territory for them. The dominant car, fighting together for a world championship. So there's new territory that they're stepping into. It's a whole new world at times. They're going to make some mistakes. They're going to make some errors, but I don't think, I agree totally with what Jolyon said, is that like these are not like assassins like some of the guys that we've mentioned before. They will do stuff on the track. They will go to different levels. The gloves will come off a bit more, but I don't think it's going to be like some of the really caustic stuff that we've seen in the past. When it was Lewis and Fernando, it was explosive and it got nasty and it got really, really uncomfortable. But I don't think we're going to get that here.
All right. Do you think they're going to have the car advantage in Austin?
Yes. They weren't particularly pretty in the high drag sensitivity circuits like Monza and Azerbaijan. Singapore qualifying, they got it wrong. They just weren't able to get on top of the car in qualifying, and that set the scene. Max was, George Russell was, but if you look at the race, I mean, you should make no mistake that they had the fastest car in the race. They just weren't able to use it in Singapore because of how difficult it is to overtake. So I would expect that it would take a really strange set of circumstances and conditions for them not to be back to the normal order of 2025 by the time we get to Austin.
I think Max will still be a threat. I think the way that Red Bull have improved in recent races, and also remember Silverstone, which is similar-ish to Austin. There's a few more slower corners in Austin, a few more fumbles through the mid-sector, but Max was on pole at Silverstone with the trimmed-out Red Bull. And they do seem to have found something with the way that they're approaching the weekends. We spoke, didn't we, TC, before Singapore, and you said, yeah, he's in the title fight. And I said, no, they're not going to be competitive. And they were, to be fair, in Singapore. So I think they're showing they can do it on a bigger range of circuits.
Well, look, so Max is, what is he? He's 63 points behind Piastri. Has this season got 1986 vibes about it, where you had the dominant Williams Hondas in 1986. They dominated the Constructors' Championship. And then Alain Prost snuck in at the last race in Adelaide for McLaren and won the Drivers' Championship. How realistic is something like that happening this year, with Max coming in and stealing the Drivers' Championship at the last?
You still reckon it's on, don't you?
I do. Yeah, I do. I absolutely do. I thought Max was... I thought Red Bull were incredibly buoyant after the race, and I think they were probably thrilled at the prospect of the gloves coming off at McLaren. Those two guys potentially could take each other out of a race. They're definitely going to take points off each other, whereas it's all about Max Verstappen in a fast Red Bull. And I agree with you. I think he could win this race from pole position this weekend.
We have to now assume that Max and Red Bull are going to be there and in the rest of the races. It's only because it's Max, isn't it? You can't rule him out. And the way that he pieces weekends together, he finds pole laps in Q3. That's the glimmer of a chance that is because of the level of ruthlessness of the driver. It's just tough to see how it's going to happen. If anything happens to Max in any of the 6 Grand Prix, it's over like that. And I can't see him reining it in the whole way.
But can I just say this as well? In 2025, with McLaren having up to now more or less on most occasions dominated the season. We're talking about Max Verstappen having a chance of being world champion with a car that has been second best for the majority of the season, 80-90% of the season. And this guy, we're still talking that this guy could win the world championship, and it is mathematically possible. And I just want to say that just shows how good this guy is. You know, this guy is just another planet to everybody else at the minute. And I think this is his best season as well.
The other thing is, at some point, let's say it's, Max, let's say he's leading the way of fighting for wins. At some point, Lando's got to start racing him, because Lando can't afford to finish behind Max all the time. Because he needs this buffer back to Oscar. If there's only 3 points in it between the two McLarens, that suits Oscar down to the ground. He'll win the championship. Lando needs to, in the last 3 races, he's been ahead of Oscar, but he needs to be ahead by more, which is by beating a Red Bull. So at some point, could be Austin, where there's good chances to overtake, especially into the first corner. At some point, he needs to get racy with Max as well.
Which brings us back to last year, the outside of turn 12. Where Max, I thought, played the numbers brilliantly, forcing him to go around the outside. Lando gets the 5-second penalty. What is Lando going to do if turn 12 is his best chance to get past Max, and Max every single time is going to make him go around the outside? What do you do, Jolyon?
Right, so I still think last year it was pretty sketchy, the defence from Max, to run yourself off the road. And I think if he does that again, I think he'll get a penalty for it. I think the way that the guidelines are, it's pretty well written now that it's been closed up, that you can't now defend and go off the road. But there's still this thing, isn't there, of everyone just gets a little bit shaky when you're racing Max, because you're never going to get an easy pass. He's got ability on the brakes that somehow he'll smoke it in. You'll think, no way, that's done. And he'll just scrabble it round, keep it on the track. Or if he doesn't, he'll certainly argue that there was a reason why he didn't and make a decision pretty tough for the stewards. So, yeah, that's the problem for Lando particularly, who has to force the issue with Max. It's, how does he beat this guy who's always covering the inside? Do you go for the outside and you know you're never going to keep it around the outside, but just claim to the stewards? Do you try the switchback? It's pretty difficult to achieve as well, and we saw that last year. It didn't work out, especially at 12, because the next corner's a right-hander. You're not going to overtake like that. It's tricky, and I think that's certainly going through the mind of Lando when they're racing.
Now, I have some very exciting news for you if you're in Austin this week. The F1 Hub is racing into town for a limited time only. From October the 13th to 20th, visit 1712 Congress Avenue in Austin and experience the ultimate pit stop shop for official F1 merch. These are exclusive drops that you cannot find anywhere else, from F1 and your favourite teams, as well as special edition collabs for the United States Grand Prix. The F1 Hub is only in town until the 20th of October, and then it's gone. So don't miss out, and make sure you head down to the pop-up on 1712 Congress Avenue in Austin before it's too late. For more information, go to f1.com/hub.
George Russell wins the Singapore Grand Prix.
Woo! What a weekend. Well done. Oh, yes. Come on.
George, that was mega today. Driver-car combination, perfect.
Now, George Russell dominated in Singapore for his second win of the season. New contracts for 2026 for both George and Kimi Antonelli at Mercedes are expected very soon. Can we talk about the contractual situation now, guys? Even when they announce that they're in for 26, will it give Russell and Antonelli any security at all, knowing that Verstappen is still out there and available for 27?
Russell's played a blinder, hasn't he? Soak up a little bit of contract pressure in the summer. Max doesn't take it. Knock out a couple of great races, second in Baku, wins in Singapore, and then he says, right, where's my contract now? Surely he's indispensable to Mercedes.
I mean, my understanding on that is that Mercedes, quite rightly, like any team with half an ounce of sense, are going to try to get Max Verstappen in their car. You just want the best athlete on your team, whether or not that athlete is designing the car or driving the car or whatever it is. You just want the best athlete, right? And I think it's then up to the senior, like the executive team to kind of manage that situation, but get the best athlete first off, and then we'll manage the fallout of having that best athlete, whatever your sports team is. And remember that we had this situation very recently as well in Mercedes, where the 7-time world champion Lewis Hamilton was offered a 1+1 deal. So there was security for a year, and then at the end of that year, all bets were off, and we would see whether we renewed for the other 1 or 2 years. So I think if Mercedes are prepared to do that with Lewis Hamilton, they're certainly going to be prepared to do it with George if the prize is Max Verstappen.
And imagine if for whatever reason George chooses to not sign for Mercedes. I mean, you have to say the other options for next year are not great for him, so he would be taking a bit of a hit out of principle there. But Mercedes would be stuffed. You're heading to a new set of regs with Antonelli and another driver that you're picking up from somewhere. All the established drivers that you'd want in the car are taken. They'd be absolutely stuffed for a massive championship aspiring team. They need him.
It begs the question: how good is George Russell?
I think he's top class. So I think Singapore Grand Prix, you've got Russell starting on pole, and I think you could have the faith that Russell in a Mercedes was capable of being a match to Verstappen and Red Bull. Because I think George is ticking all the boxes. I don't think there's really anything left that he's not able to do right now. And I still think Mercedes as a team, they know how to win races. They've not forgotten from their DNA of winning all those titles how to execute strategies, how to not be a rabbit in the headlights, looking at plans B or C or whatever. They know what they're doing. And I do think when you look at Russell's season, it's starting to look like he is very much a champion in waiting, I think.
Everything that I said before, that doesn't mean to say that it's fair or that should be, he should feel, well, that's a balanced situation. I'm just, we're just trying to see it from the point of view of Mercedes trying to get that big prize. And don't forget, it's a chess game, right? Isn't it? It's like what you've just talked about there, like Jolyon, this is a risk for Mercedes, but also they'll be balancing that risk of where would George really go to? What do? You take a year in what is still effectively a top team and could very much be the dominant team from next year with the lottery of the new regulations. So are you gonna do that? Or do you think a better deal is a midfield team that never has any chance of winning a world championship, but I can get 3, 4, 5 years security? Of course, they will have weighed that risk up and think that George and his team, his management team, will always back Mercedes in this case because there aren't any other top cars out there.
I still believe that George is proving enough right now, and with all the opportunities open for 27, there will be one at Ferrari potentially. Lewis will be out of contract at the end of next year. There will be Aston Martin. Fernando's out of contract. I'm not saying they'll move on, but there could be opportunities for a George Russell at his absolute peak. Who even knows what will be happening between Norris and Piastri then? There could be a chance if things do get heated between them. And Russell will just hold all the cards next year, even if he does just do the 1 year. I think he's driving at the top of his game. That's the main thing. If we all had to say who are the top 3 drivers of this year, I would have Russell in the top 2. I think he's been...
Go on, then. Let's play this game.
Oh, I've put it down now, haven't I?
Who are your top 3? Let's each give our top 3 drivers up until now of 2025.
Verstappen, Russell, Piastri, for me.
Max, of course. Oscar. And Hadjar.
No Russell in there.
No, but I do really like...
We know who your rookie of the year is anyway.
Yeah, it's got to be, hasn't it?
I actually would go the same as you, Jolyon. I think Russell has been right up there. Interesting that none of us have chosen Lando Norris in our top 3.
I just think the job of Verstappen and Russell, you can see that they've been demolishing their teammates, which makes you have to think that they're getting the most from the car, and you can't see really any errors from them. And you actually can from Lando, some from Oscar as well, obviously Baku. I think they're obviously right up there as well, and they're in a title fight. But the others just look like they're so well rounded. I know they've obviously got inferior machinery.
And can he get another result in Austin? What was he, second in Baku? He wins in Singapore. Do you think the Mercedes will go well on a sort of fast-flowing track like Austin?
Yeah, why not? I mean, they definitely, again, like when we talk about who was the fastest in Singapore, they had a good car. They had a very good car in qualifying. The car didn't translate to be as good in the race, but it was still a very good car. It wasn't the best car. I think, again, as we get to this stage in the season, it's, all development has as well and truly stopped. But it's that pre-summer and just post-summer upgrades that you're starting to see shape the pace of the cars, and then how well you can optimize it as well. People are still learning about their car. Red Bull are learning about their car, right? That car is pretty or has been pretty nasty to drive. Of course, the new floor, was it in Monza? That's helped, and it will add 1, 2, 3, 4 points of downforce or whatever it did. It's not going to turn it night and day and get the results that they're managing to get now. It's because they've optimized the car, they've made it more comfortable to drive. And I think there's a little bit of that with Mercedes as well, that as they go along the season, they learn more about the car, they learn more about how to use the tires as well, and you see that they're getting better and better results. So it will be interesting. It's going to be an interesting final 6 races, definitely.
Wasn't it just the most Mercedes thing, though? It summed up everything about Mercedes for the last 4 years. When Russell took one of the most commanding poles of the season, he did 2 laps that were more than a tenth clear of anyone. He gets out and he said, I thought that was going to be one of our worst 3 tracks of the year. And he's banged it on pole. They have no idea why they're quick or slow. I thought it was meant to be down to the temperature, and it was a heat hazard in Singapore. It's Mercedes' nightmare, and you're just trying to understand the car means that they can't be consistent. If they can't predict where they're going to be, we might be 3 well-educated, well-researched people, but I don't think we can either.
Guys, one last topic before we all jump on a plane and head to Austin. Ferrari.
Sunday is all about Charles. Another masterclass from Ferrari's favourite son. Charles Leclerc wins the US Grand Prix.
And that's my boy. Another win. Let's go.
Mega top. Mega.
It will be a Ferrari 1-2 thanks to Carlos Sainz. Ferrari's first 1-2 in the US since 2006.
Incredible 1-2 in Austin. Last year, they have yet to win a Grand Prix. Will it be any better? Rob, I'd love your take on Ferrari's season.
It's not a great place to be in Maranello when things aren't going well and there isn't a clear way out, and I think this is where the team itself can put an inordinate amount of pressure on itself, and then you just get into this vicious circle where it's just so difficult to get out, because you start to think in the short term and not in the long term. Formula One, there's a really, really simple formula in Formula One. If you want to get it right, you've got to think medium long term. Once you start thinking about the next race and have the whole operation, concentrating on what's happening tomorrow and how to find that 3/10 tomorrow, you're dead in the water, right? You've got to think about it in a much more strategic way. You've got to build the capability within your team. And what happens in Maranello, and I've seen it myself, when the pressure of not winning and being on the back foot arises, there's a tendency that the team can start to think in the very short term. We've got to get ourselves out of this whole short term. That will get the pressure off us, which will then allow us to think about, how we get back on top and win world championships. It will never work, right? I've been there. It was exactly the same when Red Bull started dominating or Red Bull started beating us. When we brought in the 2009 KERS cars, 2009, 2010, 2011, those years when we were always there, always there or thereabouts. We just needed 1, 2, 3 tenths, and we probably would have been able to be back in front. But we were always looking at how do we get 3 tenths tomorrow, and 3 tenths in Formula One is like going from base camp to the peak on Everest. It's not going to happen tomorrow. Like, stop concentrating. It just won't happen. If it happens tomorrow, it's because you've been planning it 6, 12, 18 months ago. That's why it happens like tomorrow. And that's why you see these, when McLaren's become suddenly started to become very, very competitive in 23, it was because of a 2-year plan beforehand. And I think this is where Ferrari is at now. The pressure will be immense. They have to They have to kind of batten down the hatches within the team and don't worry about what's happening today, because it's irrelevant to what you're going to be doing in 1-2 years time. But that's the type of time frame, unless they get lucky with 26. And I don't mean that in any disrespectful way, but 26, yes, you can have done a great job, but you also need a lot of your competitors to do a bad job from where they are now, right? Given the gap that they've got. So unless they get lucky in terms of that their competitors will do a bad job, 26 might be another difficult year, and they've just got to keep working through it. But they've got to remain united. I've been in that situation. It's horrible. It's horrible. It's not a nice place to be. But if you are united and if you cut out all of the outside noise, you can get through it. Once you start to, once the infighting and the instability within the team starts to arise, and you start to think, has this guy got my back? Has that guy got my back? You're dead in the water. So let's hope they can get through it. They are my team, right? They're dear to my heart, and I hate to see where they are right now. But it's up to them to get themselves out of it.
JP, thinking short term, how do you rate their chances in Austin? I mean, they were hoping to be strong in Monza, Baku and Singapore, didn't even get a podium. What does it look like for them this weekend?
It looks tough. I think I really thought the last 3 races were going to be their strong suits, and they obviously were nowhere near. The drivers just seem pretty discontented with it as well. They have the most star-studded lineup. They have 7 world titles and could be some more titles on the other side of the garage. And yet they've got 5 podiums this year, and Lewis hasn't had one. It's just not been the season that they were hoping for. They haven't even really been unlucky at times. So yeah, difficult to see that they're going to suddenly be right up the front again. I guess they'll be hoping that Mercedes have an off day and they can sneak a few points in the Constructors' Championship on them. But I think they just need to rebuild from a difficult 3 races and have a clean top 5 and get the drivers having a bit of confidence and belief back.
Rob, Lewis Hamilton has said that he underestimated the transition from Mercedes to Ferrari. As someone who knows that place inside out, how hard is it for a new driver to come in and understand the Ferrari way, if you like?
It's really difficult, and just from the fact that the whole of this nation is watching and commenting on your every move, right? Whether or not you are thick-skinned or all-skinned, that starts to get to you. You start to listen to it. You cannot not listen to it because it's everywhere. So as much as you try and ignore it, it's still everywhere. And it's not just media as well. I like my example is like when I first started working there wasn't any social media, so you used to ignore like the La Gazzetta, which is the paper, or La Corriere. I didn't read them because I didn't want to read bad stuff about either myself or Ferrari. But you can't avoid it because you go into the local shop and people want to tell you like what a particularly bad job you've done and what a particularly bad person you are. And then you go to the local cafe or the local restaurant and everybody's got an opinion. You're like, geez, I can't get away from this. And I'm sure that he feels a little bit of that. And yeah, it's been a more difficult adaptation than what he was hoping for sure.
Do you think he'll get there?
Yeah, for sure he'll get there. But he has to give himself time and he has to want to do it. This is another one. We talked about Michael being a 7-star general. This is another 7-star general, right? 7 world championships. So he has to understand whether or not he has the motivation to want to do this, to want to work through it. Of course he can. Like, look at the guy and look at what he's achieved. If he can give himself a couple of years to work through this, he can get back on top. But he's got to want to do it. He's got to feel that passion. It's got to be the first thing he thinks about on a morning, the last thing he thinks about on a night before he goes to sleep. So if he wants to do it, he can do it, but it's up to him.
Well, guys, what a great chat. Thank you both very much. Let's end this with some predictions. I would like from each of you a sprint winner and a top 3 for Sunday's Grand Prix. JP, off you go.
Right, I reckon I'm plucking it out from nowhere here, but let's go for Norris wins the sprint, and then the Grand Prix, Verstappen, Norris, Piastri. Keeps everyone on their toes.
I'm going to say Max wins the sprint. I'm going to say Lando wins the Grand Prix, Max is second, and Oscar's third.
And I'm going to go for I think Sunday's Grand Prix is going to be won by Max Verstappen with Oscar in P2 and Lando P3. And I think Max is probably going to win the sprint as well. I see this being a Red Bull weekend. Guys, thank you both very much for your time. Great chat. JP, I'll see you in Austin, won't I?
You will. Yep. Looking forward to it.
Cool. Look forward to seeing you. And Rob, will I be seeing you in Austin? Where in the world are you actually at the minute?
I am in Hollywood, doing a little bit of
Brad
work.
Pitt, eat your heart out.
Yeah. Me and there's a few big studios out here who've got me out to audition for some parts. It's between me and Brad, I think so. Obviously, I'm significantly more handsome, so.
You're younger?
No, we're just doing some work out here. We're just doing some stuff out here. Yes, I will probably be in Austin, but I will definitely be in Mexico.
Look forward to seeing you. Thanks both very much for your time. Good to see you.
Thanks, guys.
And in selected countries, you can hear Jolyon's analysis of all the action in Austin this weekend on F1 TV. And you can keep across everything that happens at f1.com, the official F1 app, and at F1 on social media. Thank you very much for listening. We will, of course, be back on Monday with our review of the United States Grand Prix. F1 Nation is produced by Formula One and Audio Boom Studios.